Hello, Anna and Martin.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Anna, will you take notes of this meeting?
Yes, I will, of course.
Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Good in taking notes.
Thank you.
Paragraf med, en paragraf indeholder indhold, du er interesseret i. Så den gælder, der hører til, det vil du også gerne. Men hvis det er tekst, du kigger på, du ikke er interesseret i det, så den gælder, der hører til, at du selvfølgelig heller ikke. Det vil sige, eksempel, du er interesseret i det, der har med kontrakten at gøre. Det vil sige, det, der typisk starter med. Der er typisk, hvor hvis ikke der står et, så er det det, I vil have skrevet ind på, hvis I skulle skrive selv. Ja, og det vil ikke være på for eksempel, det her er kontrakt mellem Oticon og Blink. Der vil jo ikke skrive ind. Det er det, altså, jeg vil gå så langt som at sige, at
Does any of you has idea on how to see the chat while I am in presenting mode?
No, sorry, I was struggling with this in the morning as well.
Well, I'll be monitoring the chat.
Okay, because if I am presenting, I don't see the bottom to, yeah, maybe now. How do I get that?
I could only read the chat when somebody else message, and then it would appear in your notification.
Now I get this chat. Now. Okay. Have to go up, go here and see the chat. Yeah. Okay. But sorry, you, Martin, will take care of the chat.
Yes.
Okay. Who will do the introduction to the? You will do this also. You will.
Yeah.
This text. Yeah.
Yeah, the text in the instructions. Yes.
Yes.
Just to say good morning, Roberta and all. It's Hanne.
Hi, Hanne. Good morning.
Good morning.
How many are we now?
Not many, I think.
7 in total now.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I think it is time to begin. Martin, could you tell me how many participants there are so far?
At this moment, we have 14 people in the room.
14.
14, yes.
Thank you very much. So I welcome you to the day two of the day two session of the Working Group 1, the Arctic Observing Summit meeting. Our working group is about design, optimization, and implementation of the observing system. And it's led by me together with Alice Bradley, that is also online, and Ayo Aiken. I give the floor to you, Martin, to introduce the days of the meeting in general.
Yeah, okay. Good morning, afternoon, evening, and welcome. The circumpolar Arctic is the contemporary home to many different indigenous peoples. As researchers and others who are working in or reside in the Arctic, we recognize these lands and waters as the most unceded traditional homeland of the indigenous peoples. It is the responsibility of each of us to learn, know, and gain better understanding of indigenous people and cultures with which we engage. With that in mind, let's engage in open-minded community building collaboration as described by the AOS2020 Code of Conduct shared in the chat window. Now, some logistics before we start the presentation. You joined with your camera off and your audio muted. If you unmute yourself at any time, please remember to remute after speaking. We don't have phone users. Why do we want you to keep muted? Because we can hear your typing conversations when you aren't muted. And if you use the hold function of a phone, it can cause disruption. If you have the option, use a headphone to avoid echo. If you want to see the Zoom controls, hover over the window and then they should show up at the bottom of the screen. You can chat and see other participants via these controls. If you have a question, you can type them in the chat window or unmute yourself and speak out loud. If you need help, you can message us in the chat. You can also use the raise hand tool, which is in the participants window. I've lost track. And if you don't have a microphone, you can also just type into the chat. And we are recording this presentation, and the video file, audio file, slides, and relevant links will all be available on the agenda tab of the Arctic Observing Summit website, which I shall also post into the chat shortly. And with that, I give it back to Roberta.
Thank you, Martin. I would like to invite all the participants to write in the chat briefly name and affiliation, and so that we can collect this information in the recording of this session. Martin, how many people there are at the moment?
$17.
Okay. We need to keep track a little bit so that you will know how many groups we will form in the breakout session. So here I will introduce you the agenda of the day of this session and the scope of our meeting. I will go briefly to an introduction explaining some basic concept. Those of you who were yesterday at the session of this working group 1 have already become familiar with this concept, but maybe there are participants who start fresh to this working group now, so I will repeat something. We will start with an open discussion in which we will address this question: how do you evaluate the most important variables, and how do you link these variables to area of societal good? We will then split to breakout groups, and we will further discuss on the essential Arctic variable selection and their link to the societal benefit area. This is the main activity of this today's session. The work done in the breakout group will then be discussed and summarized when we gather together at the end in a discussion altogether to write conclusion and recommendation. So let's get started with some initial basic concept that most of you are familiar with. It's just a brief introduction on what is SEON. SEON is the Sustaining Arctic Observing Network.
Roberta, we're still
Yes.
seeing the first slide. We can't see which slide you're on.
That is a problem I encountered also yesterday. So you don't somehow, I should go out from the presenting mode.
So if you can do presenting mode, you just have to, when you hit share screen, share the desktop rather than the window.
Not sure if okay, but now maybe.
Yeah, so we can see what you're presenting now, but I think you're only presenting that window and not the whole desktop. So when you go into presenter mode, it's no longer in that window.
I see. Okay, I'm not sure if I easily could switch now to that solution, but maybe I can do so quickly that I go out from the presenting mode and I come back when needed to change slide. Yeah, I continue with this brief introduction. This Arctic Observing Network has established the Arctic Observing Summit as a mechanism to convene researchers, indigenous experts, agency personnel, private sector, all together to guide discussion for the design, implementation, coordination of an international network of Arctic observing systems. This is what we are doing here. In particular, now SOUN has identified development of a roadmap for Arctic observing and data system called ROADS as a key starting point for implementing its strategy to detail where observing and data management effort need to go and how all partners will jointly get there. What are the principles and assumptions in this roadmap? ROAD should complement and integrate the current planning approach used by existing observing network. So it's not anything new, should not be a duplication of anything, should have the basis on what is existing and integrate the current activity. ROAD should support stepwise development through.
Can you advance the slide again? We're still stuck on the SEON AOS roads page.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. ROAD should support stepwise development through a flexible, collaborating and evolving structure that allows bottom-up identification of theme and focus region. Yesterday, we discussed a lot about this process, about the design of observational frame, like the one shown on the right, where the observing system are linked to the societal benefit area via the definition of essential Arctic variable Y. This is to orient toward a more optimization and harmonization of the system to avoid, to optimize the resources, to optimize the delivery of the data to the needed community.
Okay, it seems that the connection has dropped.
Yeah, I can hear you, but it looks like
Yeah.
it's frozen.
I think Roberta's connection dropped. So I think we just have to wait for a few minutes. Or would... Ah, yeah, there she is again. Roberta, you're muted.
I seems I am back. My connection. I was gone. My connection broke. Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you see my screen now?
Yes.
Sorry very much for this interruption. It may happen. I think, yeah, I will try to continue. Hopefully it will not happen again. So I was speaking about the road process. Road as define, well, include the concept of essential Arctic variable. These are a conceptually broad phenomena that provide a structured interface for coordination and collaboration in support of societal benefit. They are at the core of this roadmap, linking the observing system capacity and observational capacity to the societal benefit area, or to the implementation of the observing system and the services provided and the societal benefit area through scheme that we had discussed yesterday. This essential Arctic variable should be identified for their criticality to achieving Arctic societal benefit. Should be defined by their observing system requirement with respect to the societal benefit. Each societal benefit dictates different requirements, and then should be implemented through specific recommendation. So should be measured in existing or new observing system. So the work of this, the activity of this working group 1 is divided into part of the first part was carried out yesterday when we identified a schema to structure the or a structure model for documenting collaboratively identified requirement and coordinate the implementation of strategy. Today, we will focus on the assessment of the impactful essential Arctic variables. Our goal for today is to identify a relatively limited set of essential Arctic variables that are assessed to be highly impactful across a wide range of societal benefit, and where rapid progress in observing or integration can be made. This is just the idea, the concept that we explained yesterday. So that where basically the societal benefit area are let's say dictate which are the essential variables that are needed to solve specific, to address specific needs of the society, and are linked to services provided through the after the collection of this variable. And these variables are then linked, collected in the framework of networks, observing system, and are delivered through data network, data repository. So this is the scheme we went through a bit yesterday, the concept we went through yesterday.
Roberta,
Yes.
a question. Could you go back one slide? So when you talk about essential variables, what is the essential variables in this slide? Is it CI's concentration, CI's type, etc., or is it just CI's?
That's an excellent question, and we have to discuss it right now. What is the granularity of that an essential Arctic variable should have? That's a key question, I would say. We should here discuss on this.
Because if sea ice is an essential variable, then ocean is an essential variable, and atmosphere is also an essential variable.
I agree.
And that will become kind of pointless.
I totally agree. But you know very well that this is the situation now. If we think about the essential climate variable, the essential climate variable are historically have been defined for climate need, for modeling application, and in a time when snow was just a layer, ice was just a layer, and there was that. So those variables were defined. All the characteristic of snow, ice, or I don't know, there is maybe even permafrost, are a single variable. While the atmosphere, of course, the data were much more described with a much higher granularity, because that was the possibility of the model in the past. Nowadays, the situation has changed. We cannot model snow with just one value. We cannot model sea ice with just one value. So I think we have to decide here if one essential variable is, it includes a group of, a set of characteristics of this variable or not. If the various spheres should be coherent in the granularity or cannot. If the granularity depends on the state of science or not. It's all a matter of discussion, and then possibly we should aim at reaching some consensus here. So I would like to start the discussion now. We are a bit late, but we don't need to go deep in that, because we then continue this topic in the breakout session. I just would like to start the discussion with this question. How do you evaluate the most important variable? How do you link this to areas of societal good? Most of you, I guess, are familiar with the concept of essential climate variable. But now here we are evaluating the role of specific Arctic variable. So are the essential climate variable, are we satisfied with them? Maybe not. Maybe the Arctic is such a specific environment that require the definition of specific variable that address phenomena that are typical of the Arctic, that are different in the Arctic compared to other regions, or are existing only in the Arctic or in the polar region. So later on, also in the breakout group, we will address the question, what is an essential Arctic variable, how we define, how we select it. Here I want to, well, the plan is to start thinking all together about this concept of essential Arctic variable, and find a criteria to select them. I see Alice, you want to say, to comment.
Yes, to get this discussion opening up more, I want to add that the roads process in Scion hasn't even entirely committed to the concept that these are individual variables. So there's some discussion about whether, rather than calling them essential Arctic variables, we should be calling them essential Arctic processes or essential Arctic phenomena. So we're using the essential climate variable model, but loosely, and approaching this process recognizing that what they use as a definition may not work in a setting where we have both big institutional observations and also small community-driven observations. So where we're thinking about these variables or processes or phenomena that we think are important to measure, we want to keep in mind that we're dealing with this across extremely different scales, user needs, and what one person might think is important about sea ice is going to be very different than what somebody else will think.
You raised a very good point. Thank you, Alice, for this clarification. I see here other raising hand. There is Yari. Yari, did you raise your hand? Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, thanks and hi. Yeah, this is I will follow quite much of this discussion and about the essential variable, climate variables, and so on. And my understanding is it's very much a sector specific. We can easily identify variables which are important for the climate, like a climate indication. If you wanted to describe state of the Arctic, an atmosphere, ocean, sea ice, then I think that we can form the N variables which are based on the geophysical measurements conducted by the satellites or any kind of in situ measurement. If we are looking about the sectors like shipping, then it's quite interesting that for shipping they have a derived. This is the new thing, is the derived something like a risk index outcome. That's it's integration of the ice thickness and concentration, but also it takes account of the ship capabilities in ice. So this is the example of the very good indicator for some kind of sector, but it needs a lot of information, a lot of different information. So it's an integrated element. I think such kind of variables can be invented for fishermen, local hunters, and so on. Sometimes in the past, I think there has been more like a discussion 20 years about the ice states. If you have one variable, very old-fashioned variable for ocean was a sea state. If there could be one variable called ice state, I think there has been quite many research projects looking for that one, but nobody haven't got any kind of solution for that one. So I really don't believe that the sea ice itself could be an essential climate variable. It has to be something more concrete, and that's very much depend on the users. Then it's one question about you, Robert, and others. So are we looking about it just like a geophysical variables, or are we also taking account of thinking about the essential Arctic variables should also describe the state of the ecosystem, fisheries, pollution, mans, all kind of aspects which are important for the cell. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Yari. I think this is a matter to be discussed here, right, among the participants in this session. I see that also Vito has risen the hand.
Can I very quickly address Yari's point that all the discussion so far is that these essential Arctic variables do need to cover a broader swath of information than just geophysical variables. So we're also talking about ecosystem, community model, community variables, and things like pollution.
I see there is also a discussion going on in the chat. I didn't refer when I was presenting some slide. Maybe you have noticed that there was the signature of Sandy Starkweather. She has also posted a presentation in the plenary session. It is available in the webpage of the conference, and that also, well, that presentation well explained the concept of essential Arctic variable and how it is used to build this road in the context of this road process. So I invite you to watch at her presentation. Maybe there is not time now to go through the chat. I will look them in the break. I would like now to move to the description of the activity in the breakout session.
Can I make my comment, Roberta?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Vito. Yes.
Yeah, I completely, I agree with Alison, and it's clear that the process is inclusive and holistic. We have even we can have the point can be in discussing the variables could be how to integrate the physical or natural science elements with the social elements. Sometimes this can become also, but to come to the question of Michael, it's clear that we have a cluster. We need to look to the whole process. We in this meeting, we should try to define criteria and rules for define these variables. For example, one point, at which level we need to stop the definition of the variables. We need WMO define resolution, time, spatial accuracy. So we need to identify this sort of elements. We start from the needs. We start from the system, the observation, the information we have about the processes. We can start from different points. The clear idea is then the essential variables should include should start from a sort of cluster that can help the expert panel to convey people that have a sufficient homogeneous competencies. So to look in deep to a specific aspect. ICE, okay, the ICE community.
Thank you very much, Vito. I think you will. We are addressing all the issues in the breakout session. As you will see how it is structured, and we will exactly address this aspect. How the essential Arctic variables are linked to the requirement, which are dictated by the societal benefit areas. If you allow me, I would go. I would proceed with the description of the breakout group discussion, because that is the core activity of this session, and I would not like to steal time away from your work from our work in the session. You will soon be split into group. These groups are not random, but topically assigned. These are the topic. You can choose which one you want between automatic in situ observation, human-based observation, remote sensing, ship, vessel, buoy, aggregated data product, model data product, reanalysis data product. Each topics has a number. So I ask you to
Roberta's connection seems to have dropped out again, so I'll just jump in here. We're going to be splitting up into groups.
Open this participant window. Funding them.
All right, lost her entirely. So we're going to be splitting into two groups with the idea that you get to kind of choose which area of which topics you'd like to cover. We only have 15 people on the call, so I don't think we have enough to cover all 7 groups. So we're going to have to cluster people a little bit into across these two, across some of these discussion areas. So Roberta, if you could share your screen again to have that list.
Yes.
In order to pick which topic you'd like to be affiliated with, if you mouse over your name in the participant list, you can get a rename button. And that, oops, my participant list has disappeared. So you can either mouse over your name in the participant list. Under more, there's the option to rename. So just add the number associated with the theme that you're interested in front of your name. Or you can do the same thing in the, if you have the bar that has videos and icons of people, it's also under the 3-dot menu that you can do the same thing. So if you go ahead and give yourself a number associated with the groups, we'll bundle people up into groups that make some sense.
So I see that people are putting numbers. If you have problem, just let us know.
Do we put the number next to the original name or?
Yes, in front of it, before the name.
I also see that we have 2 people who have raised their hands.
Michael, do you want to comment?
I don't want to stop the process. I just had one question, and that's about the specificity of these variables, or whatever you call them. I mean, there are a number of things you can measure in the Arctic that are important outside of the Arctic. So are we only considering things that are societal relevance inside the Arctic, or for people living in the Arctic, or are we taking a wider view?
Yes. For that, I will show you the second slide. Another slide. So we are asked to select to focus particularly on the food security. That is societal benefit area that is central in this specific summit, and it's the topic of the working group 3. So among the societal benefit area, we think in particular to the food security. So that means that, yes, it addresses people living in the Arctic.
And for everyone, we have a discussion template to guide this. The first half is thinking about what are the most essential Arctic variables, what that means, what level of specificity, I think is a great question to address in that. And then the second half is going to take one example EAV that you guys come up with, link it to specific questions or societal benefit areas, and then start drilling down into what level of specificity makes sense for that variable. So I've copied the template that you can edit into the chat box, and I will paste in just a second an example of what that looks like having been filled out. You're welcome to include substantially more information than we did in the example. This was just to give a sense of what this could look like. So Roberta, if you could go ahead and scroll down.
Yes, yeah, I was just going to say that this exercise is meant for, well, you represent, you are familiar with a large variety of observing system observation in the Arctic. So you can approach this exercise from your personal point of view. Either you are dealing with a complex system with a lot of variables, or you are familiar with particular variables. So the idea here, we would, it's as Alice said, it's split in two parts. We would like that you reserve about 20 minutes in the first part, which is the selection of essential Arctic variable. And you will go through this, this question that Alice, maybe I will give the word to you, Alice, to introduce them. And then also another half an hour on the, or 20 minutes in the discussion part. Two, that is to link the societal benefit area and the requirement. I would say that I will say a few words then about this table at the end. Alice, do you want to explain this vote structure? Because Alice is the one who has more actively done this template together with Hank. Hank, you are also online, and Will Ambrose, I think I saw him online. So Alice, please, you want to explain this?
Sure. The questions that were coming up a few minutes ago when we were talking about essential Arctic variables and how we might think about them are exactly what we're trying to get at with this first part. So there are some guiding questions here. You're welcome to take that discussion in whatever direction makes sense to you, and whatever direction you think kind of brings out the valuable guidance for the roads process and how we should be defining essential Arctic variables, or essential Arctic processes, essential Arctic phenomena, whatever we decide is the appropriate thing to work with. The ultimate goal of part one is that you as a group come up with one essential Arctic variable to work with for part two. So in this case, I kind of skipped a lot of that discussion, but then came down to sea ice thickness. Roberta, if you could scroll down. So part two is then linking this essential Arctic variable to relevant societal benefit areas and areas of kind of tangible good. And then what are, and the real question here is, what is the requirements for this variable and how we measure it in order to meet those requirements? So we're recognizing here that there's going to be a lot of variability in, or a lot of differences between kind of use cases or particular areas of application for some of this information in what needs to actually be measured. So the idea is that if we pick a variable and how it's being used, then we might have enough specificity that we can start to define requirements. At any point in this process, if you have feedback on the process, just add it to the page. And then just make sure whoever is taking notes shares this the copy of the document that you're working with me, so that we can get them integrated into the notes that we're compiling from this session. Hank, did you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, Hank, yes, please, Hank.
No, I'm good with that. Just to focus that on this first breakout section, we're really just doing the front section, not getting to the details of the requirements in that chart on 4, right? Where we're trying to do one and 2 up above it for this first breakout, correct?
Yeah, so if I may add, I think here we are focusing on the process of selecting essential Arctic variable. What is the relevance of having the link with or what is the importance and of having the link with essential with the societal benefit area in the, well, when selecting and when defining the characteristic of the essential Arctic variable. At the end of this exercise, there is a table. In this table, you are asked to provide a requirement for the selected essential Arctic variable with respect to the societal benefit area that you have chosen. The selection of the societal benefit area determine the kind of requirement that are needed. And then at the end of the table, you are asked to provide some characteristic of the actual observation for this observing variable. You can refer to specific observing system or the whole integrated Arctic, depending, that's free choice for you. But this exercise, you don't need to be detailed or spend much time in this table, because this is not the forum to identify, to specify really the characteristic of the essential Arctic variable. Here we want to discuss and find consensus on the process to define and select an essential Arctic variable. And part of this process is also the link to the societal benefit area, then which determine the requirement that this variable should have, and which then enable the assessment of the observation with respect to the requirement. So the gap analysis. So what we will, the goal is to discuss on the method rather than going into the details of the variable. But of course, you have to do the exercise in order to capture the whole picture of the process. So now you have selected, you all have given the name. So I would like you to be moved to the group, to breakout group, and start the discussion there. I will go away from this.
And just to clarify, we're going to do this entire sheet in the one breakout section, so we're not going to reconvene in between the two parts.
That's an important point. Sorry, do you see my slides now? My slide now? I never know what is visible.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we should reconvene back at about 11:05. So spend about half of the time on the criteria to determine the essential variable, and the second half on how to link the essential variable to social benefit area and the requirement. Martin, are you ready to move people in the session? What is the situation? Do you have enough session selection, or?
We have now 19 people on the call. There are still a handful of people that did not select a group.
Okay, maybe.
And I don't have the breakout controls room. Yeah, breakout room controls. Turns out.
Who should do that?
There is a person listed as host.
Yeah.
I'm doing the breakout rooms, and the people that haven't decided, should I just decide for them randomly?
Maybe they came up later. So people, please, I see here some, let's see if I see the name.
Roberta, if you change slides back to the one that has the list on it, But ultimately, yes, you can randomly assign people.
Okay.
So the idea here is that everybody should select the group in which you want to be by editing his name and putting the number in front of the name. So Vito, you have not selected anything yet. Help you.
Vitor Vitale. Ai, meu Deus do céu.
I send with a name, number, automatic observation.
Assign to breakout room, assign to breakout. Assign to breakout room.
Before I leave, I would just remind that in each breakout session, you should self-select the discussion leader that will then report about the outcome of the discussion of the group, and the note keeper. This is important. The note keeper will fill the template. And please refer to the link that Alice has provided in the chat, and that is also available here. So now I close this. This is the link.
I think most people will have missed this since people already have moved to the breakout rooms.
Haha, okay.
So we have to see if we can also move around between the rooms or only the host.
I don't know how to move around the rooms, but
No.
I can make you the host, so you can do that, Roberto.
I can go
That would be
around.
tricky to do because Roberta's connection doesn't seem entirely stable. And if
Yeah.
Roberta drops out, then the whole session could be ended.
Yeah, then I will not do it.
No, that's the
I
thing.
just cross the finger that people will understand what to do. Yeah.
How many breakout rooms are there now?
There are 2.
Okay.
Martin, do you want to be the host to check?
Yeah, so Roberta is going to move into one of the rooms. And
Yes, I will move now, and you may check that things are clear. But if there are only 2 groups, we will manage. I will join the group.
Roberta, you're muted.
Just a reminder, everybody has been muted on joining back.
Yeah, thank you. I apologize for not having been able to go back. I was expecting a message, but I didn't get it, so we never pressed the go back to or leave the room. So, but now we are all here. Maybe Alice, have you already started to discuss, briefly summarize the discussion in your session or not?
Everyone that was in the main room was in our session, so we were waiting for you guys to join us.
Okay, so
Anna, do you want to give a summary of our room?
Yes, sure. So we had a quite diverse and big group of, I think, 8 people. So we had Alice, Martin, Will, Jari, myself, Jabok, Tetsu, and Aneshka from different backgrounds. And we kind of combined the human-based observations and sheep vessels observations in our group. And what we were talking a lot in the first part about what sort of defines essential Arctic variables for us was the overlap in interests of different groups of users. So we thought that we see the AIVs as a sort of container of, which is quite broad, but it could be defined by particular measurements when it comes to different groups of users. And also something that was brought in the discussions yesterday, that it is good to have recommended pairing for simultaneous and additional measurements. Another criteria that we thought are important for essential variables is accuracy of measurements, because it is really important to have reliable data to be able to use it. The other thing is forecasting potential. So yeah, to use any modeling, any variables for modelings, they have to have forecast potential. And this is also something that is in the interest of different groups. And the final thing probably is the combined ecosystem impact. This is something that comes from the concept of ecosystem-based management, because you know, when we're thinking of very particular parameters that are affecting one, for example, group of organisms, that might be only interesting for scientists, but there are things that could have a combined impact on the entire ecosystem functioning, and those are parameters that should be primarily used as essential. And then we had a little bit of a discussion to choose one parameter to focus on in the second part of the exercise. And we decided to focus on the seawater temperature. I won't go into too many details here. I'll just show you our template. So yeah, we tried to fill in all the rows, and we're talking about different spatial resolution and what instruments could be used to measure water temperature. And why we thought it is a good example is because basically it fulfills all the criteria above. So it definitely has a forecast potential. It has implementations for different societal needs. And it, of course, has a combined ecosystem impact. I think that's it. If anyone wants to add anything.
I do want to emphasize that we thought that for something to be an essential Arctic variable, it needed to have implications across different sectors, and that the kind of key idea of calling something an essential Arctic variable, or we didn't discuss this nomenclature, but maybe changing the name to a shared Arctic variable or a community Arctic variable, is that these are things that many groups could be measuring, but also many groups will be needing. And that's where the strength of an integrated Arctic observing system could come in being able to help mitigate and manage the relationships with this information across these different sectors.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. That was, I think it was a very intense discussion and nice outcome. maybe I can say a few words about the main outcome of our group. Yeah, so a lot of discussion, most of the discussion focused on the concept, the definition of what is an essential Arctic variable. There was some reluctance to the concept, to the separation, the distinction between Arctic and global variable. A lot of effort has been done to define essential variables in different domains, and this effort is still going on in many consortia and in many groups. So we should not reinvent the wheel. We should start from what has already been done. But still, as we want to use this concept to help the roadmap process to optimize the observation in the Arctic, then we were thinking about clusters of variables that address altogether the same services, and the services are then linked to the societal benefit areas. In particular, we had two examples, let me see, the extreme weather and the atmospheric vertical structure. So atmospheric vertical structure include temperature, moisture, wind, cloud profiles in the atmosphere. And both these two clusters are very relevant for all services related to safety, navigation, food security, climate adaptation, climate mitigation. So they have a really large societal benefit areas. They serve many societal benefit areas. Well, then the point is, is it okay at this stage? Can we have clusters in the workflow that then are linked to specific variable inside the cluster, as I mentioned, for the case of the vertical structure, that includes already well-defined essential climate variable that could be also essential Arctic variables. Yes, we started to fill the table for the atmospheric vertical structure, and presently, it's rather straightforward because it is measured, all these parameters, while most of them are measured with the same device from stations. But these observations are completely missing in the Arctic. So one main concern, one issue that was raised by several participants in our group was the fact that what the main problem is that okay, in the Arctic is not different from the rest of the globe concerning the processes that are occurring there, the physical processes. But what is only different is the temperature range in which these processes occur. And from the point of view of the physics, from the point of view of the logistic, the main difference, or the really big difference, is that the Arctic is lacking almost entirely the observations. So we have no mean to resolve a phenomena that elsewhere are resolved or are studied or are observed. So the main point is to manage to get this observation from the Arctic Ocean. but then this helped in filling the table, because when we utilize atmospheric vertical structure as example, then we see that we can easily fill the requirements. And when we go to observation status, we clearly see the big gaps that this observation have. So I think this is, in synthesis, is all. But I invite the people in the group, Vito, Hank, Michael, Hanne, who was there? Yui Kodama, to comment on this. Do you have anything to add? Heikki Lihavainen also. Did I capture the synthesis, or I missed something relevant?
I'm good with that discussion.
Okay.
I think then you was make a good synthesis of what of the deep discussion we had.
All right, thank you. So I open now the slides that, well, I should share the screen. I hope it's this. The point here is, can we agree on any recommendation for linking societal benefit area to essential Arctic variable in the road process? Have you reached this point? I'm asking from group 2 first, but or then I can also say what we have thought a little bit in group 1, but Alice or other from group 2, can you address this question?
I can start, but I would encourage other people in the group to chime in.
Absolutely.
We, in making these links between societal benefit areas and what is an essential Arctic variable, we really thought that the criteria that we got closest to was this idea that essential Arctic variables are variables that are critical to informing multiple benefit areas. So multiple sectors and their services rely on information about certain things, and what then would qualify as an essential Arctic variable is contingent on it informing multiple societal benefit areas.
Yeah. Okay.
But if anybody else would like to add or expand on that, please do.
Oh, that was good. I mean, I think one of the interesting things came out was the thought that we might be able to actually come up with a sort of an overlap matrix of, you know, sectors times variables, and then somehow derive the most essential variable process phenomena. That was an interesting approach, I thought, anyhow.
One question for you. Do you think that you would find some difference doing that for the Arctic compared to what has been done globally? For variables.
No, I think the approach would be interesting globally. This is an interesting discussion about global versus Arctic. I mean, certainly for some phenomena, many, maybe most, that's true. But what distinguishes the Arctic, of course, is, at least for now, there's ice. And that changes the water stratification and a whole bunch of other things. So while I can appreciate that we don't want to reinvent the wheel, the Arctic has that distinguishing characteristic, which, you know, other than the Antarctic and some marginal seas, don't have.
Yeah, I can really say that we have to do this exercise for the Arctic because it's so specific. The sectors, if you think about the shipping as a sector or fishing as a sector, for them the ice is obstacle. Mm-hmm. Then if you're thinking about the natives, and then for them the ice is an asset, so they can use this ice, land-fast ice, to support the activities.
I would agree that the sea ice is a special factor that doesn't, with the exception of the Antarctic, exist anywhere else. But why and how and what can you do about it? If you want to do sea ice forecasting, you need an atmospheric model. That atmospheric model is exactly the same model that's being used everywhere else. In fact, it's very often a global model. Has the same physics as everywhere else, but the temperature range and the moisture range and the way the clouds are composed is different because of the different conditions. But it's the same physical laws. You cannot make a model that is Arctic specific.
Well, now I was talking about the sectors, not about the science. I was talking really about if you're looking about evaluate about these essential variables, how the sectors consider of those. One of the things what we were thinking also about this recommendation, how to link the social benefit areas to AAVs, was that are the variables able to forecast? Is there forecasting possibilities for any of the variables? And we were thinking that is one big plus for selecting of these variables.
But whichever way you cut this cake, if you do it by sector, or if you do it by services, or if you do it by social relevance, you're going to end up with overcrossing patterns. So if you think about shipping as a sector, I'm sure they're interested in extreme weather. For that, you need a forecast, and that model needs to be as good in the Arctic as it is elsewhere.
Yeah, that's the reason why we are talking about the matrix. We are looking, I don't know how many dimensions of the matrix we
too many to think of.
It is really, of course, the extremes. Extremes are important for everything. Every practical life there, every outdoor activities in Arctic. But if you start about the variables, if you start about the sectors, if you start about the social benefit there. So I don't know, is the social benefit areas and sector the same thing? Maybe we can think that they are 170, then we are just end up for two-dimensional matrix. But that could be the one if we listed all the available variables what we can invent, they could be a 30 or 50 or 100. Then we have a sectors which could be something like 10 or so, and then we listed what variables are most important thing.
Or we could just conclude that we need to do better weather forecasting, and we already know what that takes. And that would save us a lot of time.
Do we really think that better weather forecasting would solve all of our problems, though?
Not all of our problems, but it would solve a lot of problems.
Absolutely. And I think they're like, where we're at as a community is that there's a huge amount of overlap with global and other networks, but that overlap is not 100%. And
no.
If it were 100%, we wouldn't be having these conversations.
No, and that was why I asked the question even before the breakout group, if we are only to consider things that are important for the Arctic communities and nothing else, because then the question is different.
Do you think we can fully separate those things?
That's what I'm asking.
But I want to come back to my essential Arctic services. I mean, if we could define those, then it would be easier, I think, that we start at a higher level than going all the way down to the essential Arctic variables and then track them back to societal benefit area. And also there is a lot of work already done on specific variables that we should benefit from. But maybe when you summarize our conclusion, Roberta, then this.
Yeah, I ask your help, but can you, Anne, introduce the concept to everybody, because I didn't speak about it in my synthesis, in my takeaway messages. I didn't speak about the essential Arctic services that you discuss now.
Yeah, what I was thinking is that you have the extreme weather, you have also predictions about where the ice is for shipping, and you can have ecosystem services and so on. If we can define those and link them to the societal benefit areas, then we can see what kind of model systems and observations we need, and also what kind of research topics will be essential for the community to solve. Where are the gaps there? Rather than going all the way down to the essential variables and maybe miss something.
Yeah, so the point, the question is about the structure of, well, the flow diagram. Instead of having societal benefit area, should focus on the services, and then the services can also be linked to the, or like the service layer should be included in the flow in a way. Now it was the emphasis was on the societal benefit area, but it would be easier if it would be on the services, which is
actually quickly follow up on that and bring up again the idea of broad ecological implementations, because one of the things that makes Arctic unique is very fragile ecosystems, and there are a lot of things that have multiple impacts on ecosystems. So I think defining societal beneficial areas, we should also take into consideration ecological implementations.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anna. I think it's this discussion is really useful to bring forward the different perspective from the different background, and this is what we are called to do here, and that's nice. Do you address in the group 2 the granularity of the essential Arctic variable? I mean, the problem, for instance, now, if we look at the global climate variable, there is high granularity in the atmosphere. In the atmosphere, you see temperature, humidity, whatever variables, clouds, several parameters for the clouds, several variables. But if you go at lower level, for snow, there is snow. There is not snow temperature, snow density, snow microstructure, snow depth, and whatever. If sea ice, there is just sea ice, not sea ice thickness, not sea ice temperature profile, and so on. Did you address this issue or not?
Yes, to a certain extent. What we were thinking is that these essential Arctic variables are kind of, to use your term, clusters of variables, where there are sets for a particular EAV. There might be a couple of sets of requirements for different use cases. So if you're measuring ice thickness for the purposes of informing climate models, that's going to have different requirements than ice thickness for the purpose of telling community hunters if it's safe to go out on the shore fast ice. And so being able to bundle these kind of requirement or best practice sets for different applications and highlight where there's overlap between them, and maybe highlight where there's kind of recommended observation pairings, where you might want to, in addition to measuring ice thickness, maybe be measuring ocean temperature below it. that guidance could be a really important outcome from a structured model like this.
Mm. Thank you. I think these are all important points because, well, the goal here is to find, well, in this summit, to find a consensus on some process, some method to be able to assess, to be able to evaluate, and to be able to optimize the Arctic observing networks. So we don't really need to go much into the detail, but I think these considerations are all useful to go to the point. I don't know if we managed to reach a consensus on a strategy here, because to me, I don't know what is your opinion, your feeling about it, but we are discussing about options, and there are pros and cons in the approaches. I'm not sure if we are able to reach clear consensus on the methodology, or do you see really, can we see really that something steam up clearly from the discussion that we have had? But that's something that we can, of course, look more through when we look at the notes and we try to think better on that.
So Roberta.
Yes.
I don't know how many man hours have gone into thinking about this before, but I would say it would be kind of unreasonable to expect that we in 2.5 hours could come up with a consensus that would confirm or not confirm what everyone else been done before. I think we make a list of things that we have thought about and discussed and questioned, and then wiser brains than ours will have to deliberate over this at a later time when there's plenty of time to think, and maybe it will come up on the next one as well, the next observing summit or in some other context. But I think that we should be able to say, yes, we do this, or no, we don't, in 2.5 hours after all the work that's gone into this is quite unreasonable.
Yeah, I think this is very much a community idea sourcing process, yes. and the idea that we'll come to a consent. The hope is that some good ideas will float, and beyond that, I think any consensus and any formalizing is going to have to go to SEAN and go to expert groups to iron out details that we don't have in 2.5 hours.
Yes, good. Is there anybody else who want to add a point of view consideration to this discussion? So one comment about these forms. Alice, I have shared our form with you, but it's not completed. So I think, can you give us some hours to edit it? Because
yes, yeah. So the reason we set these up as Google Forms that are, or Google Docs that are shared, is that you can continue editing. You're welcome to open a new copy of that link and fill out whatever you want to submit on your own. If you have thoughts that you don't think are adequately captured in the discussion, we can take as many of these and for as long as we need to. So just by sharing it with me, I have whatever the most up-to-date version is of what you've got.
Yeah, that's a good point. So if you have a second thoughts also that you you get in mind after this discussion, you just use the link and open another form. Do you all have the link? Have you managed to copy it from the chat?
I just put it again in the chat box. It's also in the Working Group 1 agenda document, which you can get to on the AOS website from the Working Groups page. So if you have thoughts at a later date, you're welcome to open a new copy of the document and share it with me.
Okay, thank you, Alice. And I guess because I can go to the next slide now. If I can make it bigger. Do you see?
Yes.
Okay. I don't want to risk to break the connection, so maybe I leave it like it is. This session is going to be repeated later during this day, during today, and that it will be led by Alice. You will chair the other session, right?
Yes, the one from 16:30 to 19, I will be chairing with the same content as this session.
So it will be a replica of this session, but of course with different participants. Then we will have a cross-cutting session between 14:30 and 16 UTC, where Working Group 1 will work together with Working Group 3, that is about food security.
That session is also open to people from any working group, so we're expecting a lot of people there.
Yes, but the topics is like the two working group team, the two team that are forming or like designing the crossing cut session is Working Group 1 and Working Group 3, isn't it? Or it's open, or it's for all?
It is for all.
It's for all. Okay, so that, sorry, I misunderstood. But then the point is to address those issues that are cut across the different working packages. That session, do you know, Alice, who is the chair of that session?
Hayo will be chairing that session.
Hayo, okay.
Yeah.
Hayo Aiken, yes.
Yes.
Then this evening, or like it's today, very late in Alaska time, there will be consolidating recommendation session. So we will later today try to summarize the results or the recommendation from this session and send it to Hayo. And but there is another session about consolidating recommendation tomorrow at 11:13, between 11 and 13. Yes.
Yes. So the consolidating sessions will be more discussion, taking recommendations and things that have come out of these discussions and the cross-cutting one in order to put together some sort of recommendations to move forward. So Hayo will be chairing the session that's tonight in order to be a good time zone for Alaska to actually be awake during. And then I'll be chairing the session that's tomorrow morning.
Oh, very good. Very good. So basically, you, Alice, will collect all the recommendation that we have written down from the previous session of this Working Group 1. But if I understood right, all participants to Working Group 1 can attend or are welcome to the session and contribute to the final discussion. Is it so?
Yes. Yeah. The idea for these sessions is to have something to some sort of document with recommendations to come out of them, but they're also there to be another round of gathering ideas and thoughts that have come up during the AOS.
Yeah. Correct. Do you have as anybody of you have a final thought, comments on this whole process through this session? Now we go later to the conclusion in the evening and tomorrow. But did you follow the idea so of the implementation of the roadmap through these two steps, the identification or adoption of a structure model for the synthesis from the fragmentation to help to reconcile the fragmentation of the various observing systems toward a more focused and organized and integrated Arctic observing system, where we can have the essential Arctic variable possibly as a mean to optimize and identify gaps in an objective way. And then the second part was focusing on the definition and concept of Arctic essential variable. I don't know if you have a comment, general comment on this road process in itself. Jari, you have raised the hand.
Yeah, in fact, I just would like to ask about these roads. Maybe I missed some of the introduction talks, but I'm interested to know what happens next. So after this meeting, what happens for these notes and summaries? Is there any kind of follow-up meeting, or are we waiting for the next 2 years to then continue this kind of discussion? Or is the aim up, is that they want waiting from us an input, really some kind of suggestion, white paper about the Arctic essential variables? Is there any way for us to contribute for the final version?
Something that we're going to be discussing during these consolidation sections. And at this stage, roads is a rough idea of how to move forward by SAON. Our recommendations will go back to SAON and say, okay, you had the idea for the roads process. This is what we think it should look like. And this is how we think, or our suggestions for how you run that out. And so part of our consolidating recommendations, we have one output from AOS that's going to the Arctic Science Ministerials, but another big output from AOS is going back to SAON saying, okay, the community has spoken, this is what we think needs to happen for this to be a legitimate process. And so part of the recommendations is going to be, where do we think we need to have extra rounds of soliciting community input? Where do we think it's going to be important to cast these wider nets?
Right. Thanks, Sally. So I understand that there is not definitely deadline for submitting any kind of input.
No, and we need to suggest to SAON where we think additional input would be valuable.
Yeah, and I think Hayo and Alice and others have been quite clear that this process needs to continue between the meetings. So there's going to be probably more going on between this meeting and the next meeting than between this meeting and the last meeting. I think, would that not be accurate, Alice?
Yeah, I think that is correct. And one of the things that we're hoping that we learn from this online version is how we effectively solicit community input without everyone having to show up in one place. So there has been a moderate amount of activity between the last AOS and this one, and we're expecting that between this one and the next there will be substantially more and kind of more public activity.
Thank you very much, Alice, Will, and everybody for the contribution to this session. We have to close now. It was really intense, and I'm happy about the outcome. Thank you very much to all, and now we close here the session. Thank you and bye. Have a nice day.
Thanks, Alice, Roberta.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Berta. Thanks, bye.
Thank you, bye.